Hey guys, so I wasn't expecting to make this video, but considering how this show turned out, I decided to make a video on Big Brother Reindeer Games and do a player ranking of that season. Now, obviously, we heard about Reindeer Games at the BB25 finale, and at the time, myself and others were kind of disappointed that it wasn't like a regular legend season or even a celebrity season. But I feel like the season turned out a lot better than anyone really expected, and actually was kind of entertaining by the end of it. And plus, since there are social strategy elements to it, I did decide, you know what, why not? Let's do a player ranking here. So I'll be ranking all 9 players from this season based on the games that they played. And let's not waste any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 9, the player played the worst game on this season is Cameron, the first boot. And thank God, I mean, it's no secret that I'm no Cameron fan, and I was pretty disappointed that he was cast on the season, but it didn't shock me considering how much production seemed to love him and considering that he won America's Favorite House Guest at the finale. But again, he ends up playing a pretty bad game here where right at the bat he's on the outs. No one really seems to want to work with him, and while some of that can be due to pregame and him being the most recent player, it's still something that leads to him being targeted right at the bat, where obviously they gang up on him during the first challenge, and he's obviously put into showdown right away, to where he's taken out by Xavier by a good amount. So really, it's nothing worth praising here. And again, considering that I'm not a big Cameron fan, I'm kind of glad this is the outcome that we got. But obviously, it's the worst game by a good amount, which is why he's here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we're actually jumping forward quite a lot actually to someone who actually made it to Reindeer Games, but if we look at their path there, it's very mediocre, and here we have Xavier. And I was kind of disappointed by Xavier's game here, where really he doesn't do that much well outside of winning comps, where of the 5 Santa Showdowns that played during the season, Xavier's put into 4 of them. And the one that he wasn't put into was the duos round where Frankie and Taylor had won the Jingle Bell Brawl, and through a random draw, Taylor got to pick between him and Nicole over who was safe there, to where he would have been put in elimination had Frankie drawn his team instead. So he very easily could have been put into every single Santa Showdown during the season, really highlighting his poor position throughout a lot of the game. But even outside of that, he makes a pretty big blunder during episode 3 where he had put Britney into the elimination thinking she was going home, only for him to later tell her that he was protecting Danielle after she wins that showdown and had the choice of who to send in next, which is obviously pretty bad and leads directly into Danielle's downfall there. And while he can point to some things like the fact that Frankie won a lot of comps during the season, and also he was a pretty big comp threat to where he was kind of seen as someone to take out other people's targets, it's still not great that he was put up for elimination time after time and came relatively close to coming home during a lot of the game. So for that reason, while he does make it to the Reindeer Games, I can't really have him higher than number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have the earliest boot left to talk about, and here we have Cody. And obviously Cody had a pretty big target on his back coming into the season due to him being one of the bigger comp beasts on the board, to where it was pretty unlikely he was going to do well across the season, and obviously that leads to him being the second boot of the season. But I think the main thing that'll give Cody over Xavier is that while he was an earlier boot, he was still able to get within a core alliance where he was obviously aligned with the other BB16 people, and while he wasn't in the best relationship with Nicole coming into the season, they obviously managed to still have a working relationship early on. And I think the other thing to point out is that he was obviously taken out during the round with the teens twist, where obviously through the other team winning the challenge, that entire side was safe, meaning that there were only 4 options left to be taken out. And with Nicole being chosen for safety, that led to a 3-person Santa Showdown, which is obviously different from the other rounds. So I think there was still a bit of unluckiness with the round itself. But at the end of the day, I feel like he was still probably not doing well in the season considering the target on his back, which is why he's here number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we have the next boot on the board, and here we have Danielle Reyes. And obviously it was great seeing Danielle play again after she had turned down BB22 due to the world situation. And obviously she was great TV across the season. And I feel like early on she was a relatively dynamic player, being part of the People of Color Alliance as well as the Women's Alliance, though she was very willing to flip on them if the opportunity served her. And she does get pretty unlucky during her boot round, where obviously Britney ended up winning the Santa Showdown after Xavier thought that she wouldn't survive it, and obviously Xavier makes a mistake by telling her that he was protecting Danielle, which then causes Britney to put Danielle into the challenge, to which she had obviously no chance of survival. So I think she does get pretty unlucky, and she obviously is targeted due to someone else's mistake. But at the end of the day, she is only the third boo of the season. And plus, even if she had made it to the Reindeer Games, I don't think she wins the season. I feel like she was kind of being outclassed in a lot of these competitions, and I feel like she probably doesn't win the games if she gets to the end. So I think that was enough to have her this low on the list, though it was still fun seeing her on the season. So she's here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we are moving down the boot order again, and here we have Josh. And kind of similar to Danielle, I was actually kind of impressed by how Josh navigated a lot of the early game, where he seemed to be in several alliances, and he seemed pretty well liked within the game. But kind of similar to Danielle, he kind of gets unlucky during the boot round, where obviously due to the duos twist, it basically forces Frankie to have to choose between him and Britney. And obviously with Frankie being closer to Britney, that forces him into Santa's showdown against Nicole, where obviously he is eventually taken out. So obviously I think he gets a bit unlucky there, as I feel like Frankie would have been more likely to pick Xavier had he been given the opportunity. But at the same time, kind of similar to Danielle, I don't know if he wins if he gets to the end, or obviously never wins a comp throughout the season. And while it was a very close finish between him and Nicole, I feel like he probably doesn't win the game if it gets to the Reindeer Games, as I feel like there were plenty of other competitors there. And plus, I think the fact that Frankie chose Britney over him kind of speaks to his lack of positioning at that point. But I still feel like his game was somewhat impressive, which is why he's here at number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and I feel like this person was also pretty close with Josh. However, I did decide to go with Britney Haynes here. And again, it was fun seeing Britney here after all these years. And I feel like on this list, I feel like Britney edges out Josh in several regards. One is the fact that she does at least win a comp. Now, mind you, it's the Santa Showdown, and obviously that was the point where Xavier put her in thinking that she was going to lose it, only for her to actually pull it out with over a minute left, despite her having less time than Xavier, who only had 12 seconds left at the end. So I do find that aspect somewhat impressive. And plus, I feel like she was in a better position within a lot of the power structure that allowed her to get through the game. Where obviously during the round where Josh goes home, Frankie chooses to save her over Josh. That puts him into the Santa Showdown. And she obviously comes relatively close to making the Reindeer Games as well, where she comes very close to winning that quiz comp. And had she done that, she would have gotten into the Reindeer Games and kind of just gets beaten up by Xavier due to that final comp being incredibly physical. Now, mind you, I don't know how well she would have done had she made it to the games itself, but I feel like the fact that she was at least close to making it to the games and kind of gets unlucky by the comp selection at the end does put her above Josh in my eyes, which is why she's here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I actually debated this one to a degree. I actually considered putting this person below Britney at a point, but at the end of the day, she came relatively close to winning, and here we have Taylor Hale, the runner-up of the season. And I think the tough thing about Taylor is I feel like the way that she navigated the game strategically is a bit questionable, where obviously her sides ended up losing a lot of her numbers during a lot of the game. I feel like the Frankie and Nicole alliance really edged her out in a lot of cases. And I also think she was a relatively big target for a lot of the game, where even though she never goes into a Santa Showdown, I feel like she probably would have had certain Jingle Bell Brawl cons played out differently. Where while she was safe during the first round at least, I think in episode 2 she probably would have been put up had the other team won. I also think she gets put up in episode 4 had she not won the Jingle Ball Brawl there with Frankie. I also think she could have been in danger at the final 5 round had that been a normal round and she had not won the Jingle Ball Brawl there. So I think there are definitely points in the game where she was being targeted, but I also think her allies really saved her during key rounds, particularly during the safety chain in episode 3, where despite Nicole and Frankie winning the first 2 rounds of that, she somehow doesn't get put in that spot. So I do find that somewhat impressive. And at the end of the day, she was relatively close to winning, where coming into the final game, she was actually ahead of Nicole, and obviously Nicole has to come back. And considering that I have more faith in Taylor as a competitor compared to Britney, I think that's also a big factor in why I have her above Britney on this list. But at the end of the day, I feel like the top 2 people dominated the game more, which is why she's here at number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and I actually debated the order of these two, as I feel like these two definitely dominated more of the game than the rest of the people on the list. However, after thinking about it, I did decide to switch the order a bit. But at number 2, we actually have Nicole Franzel, the winner of the season. And obviously I know a lot of people don't like Nicole very much, and I personally could have done without her on this season. But she still played a mostly solid game, where she was able to be in the majority lines for most of the game. She was able to get towards the end of the game with a lot of the people that she was close to. And in general, the fact that she wins against a pretty stacked field competitively is pretty impressive in my eyes. But with that said, I think there are a couple of really big knocks to her game. I think the biggest one is at the final 6 where she is put into Santa Showdown against Josh, and while she gets unlucky that she was put in there to begin with considering the duos twist and Taylor got to choose between her and Xavier, she almost goes home in that situation where her and Josh end up falling out of that comp mere seconds apart from each other, and had Josh just hung on a little bit longer, she would have gone home at the final 6. So I think that's really bad on her end. And you also have the fact that she barely wins at the end, where she was behind Taylor for a lot of that final comp, and she really just mounts a comeback at the tail end, where she's able to come back during that final stacking comp. But in general, I find this win not super impressive in my eyes. And yes, while it's a different style of win from regular Big Brother, I feel like on this ranking, I do have to knock her for that. So because of that, I do have her here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe played the best game on Big Brother Reindeer Games is Frankie, who obviously only gets 3rd place here, which is a bit of a shame in my eyes considering that he had essentially dominated a lot of the game, at least from a physical perspective, where obviously early on he aligns himself closely with the other BB16 players and a lot of the comp beasts, and they're able to essentially win a lot of the comps throughout the season to remain in power. Now he is put into Santa Showdown twice during the season, but obviously one of those was the safety chain in episode 3, where Nicole had won the Jingle Bell Brawl and she literally picked Frankie first in order to ensure his safety by giving him the most amount of time to complete the puzzle. So I think that's pretty impressive. In even episode 2, while he was second to last in that comp, it was obviously the team comp where half the players were already safe and he just got unlucky with that comp result. But he's essentially able to dominate the game from episode 4 on, where he's able to win the Jingle Bell Brawl in both episodes. And while he obviously comes up short at the finale, where obviously he only gets 3rd place, I find his run here to be a bit more impressive than Nicole's. I feel like he was a more consistent competitor than Nicole, to where obviously Nicole had that really bad spot at the Santa Showdown in episode 4 where she almost goes home. I feel like Frankie, while he was technically in Santa Showdowns more often than that, he wasn't in as much danger of actually going home until the very end. And I feel like had he made it to the final round of the Reindeer Games, I would have had a lot of faith in him to actually win that final comp and win the season. So I find Frankie's game a bit more impressive in my eyes compared to Nicole, which is why he's here at number 1. And there we go, that will do it for this week's video. If you liked this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. And obviously with the end of the year coming, I have my award show coming on soon, so you can look forward to that. And obviously a lot of fun stuff coming in the new year's, so you can look forward to that as well. I'm also on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.